The Führerbunker has long remained a place wrapped in shadow and intrigue, a hidden chamber of unanswered questions and endless speculation. For decades, historians, governments, and conspiracy theorists alike have debated its secrets. Soviet reports spoke of charred corpses and shattered teeth, yet every clue seemed to add fuel to doubt rather than certainty. The question lingered in the aftermath of the Second World War: did Adolf Hitler truly meet his end within these concrete walls, or was the Führerbunker the stage for one of history's most intricate and enduring deceptions? The truth has never lost its haunting power, continuing to fascinate, disturb, and captivate the world well into the modern day. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. Beneath the bustling streets of Berlin, tucked beneath the once grand gardens of the Reich Chancellery, lay the subterranean labyrinth that was both fortress and tomb. What began as a straightforward air raid shelter during the tense years leading up to global war evolved into the most infamous underground stronghold in recorded history, the site of Hitler's final stand and the place where the once mighty Third Reich collapsed into ruins. Its story, and the mysteries that still cling to its final days, have commanded attention for almost 8 decades. The tale of this underground citadel began in 1936, when the first stage of its construction was undertaken. Known as the Vorbunker, or forward bunker, this initial structure was little more than a reinforced air raid shelter built beneath the Reich Chancellery. At that time, Europe was edging toward war, and the Nazi regime, aware of the possibility of aerial bombardment, sought a secure refuge for key staff during potential attacks. The Vorbunker was functional and basic, designed solely for protection rather than comfort. Thick walls shielded its narrow hallways and cramped rooms, and its design reflected the rising anxieties of a continent poised for conflict. Yet as the years unfolded and the war spread with terrifying speed, the demands of the Nazi leadership evolved dramatically. With the Allies unleashing devastating bombing campaigns and Berlin itself becoming a frequent target of destruction from above, the need for a stronger, more impenetrable shelter became undeniable. By 1943, Hitler and his inner circle realized that survival in the capital required more than just a refuge; it demanded a command center from which they could continue to direct the crumbling war machine. Thus, the Führerbunker was ordered, constructed beneath the gardens of the Chancellery, and completed by 1944. The new structure was unlike anything ordinary citizens of Berlin could have imagined. Positioned 8.5 meters beneath the earth, roughly the height of a 3-story building, it was encased within walls nearly 4 meters thick and topped by a concrete ceiling over 3 meters deep. These fortifications were intended to withstand the relentless thunder of Allied bombs that rained down on the German capital. Within this reinforced tomb stretched a complex of 30 rooms connected by narrow corridors, sealed behind heavy steel doors and reinforced bulkheads. Its design made escape difficult, but survival possible. Emergency staircases snaked upward toward the surface, one exit hidden within the Chancellery itself and another opening into the garden above. Ventilation towers, disguised so as not to attract attention, provided air to the people hidden far below. Inside, the bunker operated like a grim self-contained world. A diesel generator supplied electricity, pumps kept the water flowing, and communication lines linked Hitler directly to Germany's disintegrating front lines. Even as Berlin was reduced to rubble, he could issue commands through phone, radio, or telex, fighting a war that had already been lost, at least on paper. At its center lay Hitler's own quarters, functional yet symbolic of his obsession with order and legacy. His bedroom was small, sparsely decorated with only a narrow bed and basic furnishings. His private study, however, was dominated by a portrait of Frederick the Great, the Prussian king whose defiance in the face of overwhelming odds Hitler sought to emulate in his final days. The adjoining map room became the nerve center of the bunker, its walls covered with charts and papers detailing a military reality that no longer existed. Nearby, Eva Braun's modest suite was furnished with items brought down from the Chancellery above, a futile attempt to create a sense of domesticity in a place otherwise consumed by the business of war and survival. Despite its structural strength, conditions inside the Führerbunker were bleak and miserable. The damp walls leaked water, pumps whirred constantly to stave off flooding, and diesel fumes mixed with stale air. Artificial lighting could never fully dispel the gloom, and the claustrophobic atmosphere weighed heavily on the minds of everyone trapped below. By January 1945, as Soviet forces drew ever closer to Berlin, Hitler withdrew into his underground sanctuary permanently. On January 16, he abandoned the chancellery above and moved into the Führerbunker, making it his final residence. For the next 105 days, he lived out the last chapter of his life underground, adhering to rigid routines even as the world outside fell into chaos. Each morning began with grim military briefings in the map room, where generals presented hopeless reports. Meals were taken with Eva Braun and his secretaries in a modest dining area. Occasionally, Hitler would step outside into the ruined garden with his beloved dog Blondie, though such walks became increasingly rare as Soviet artillery drew nearer. Tea in the afternoons, tense conversations with his closest associates, and long late-night discussions marked the rhythm of life below ground. Around him gathered his most loyal followers, Joseph Goebbels, Martin Bormann, Heinz Ling, Otto Gunsch, Traudl Junge, guards, radio operators, and cooks, all enduring the suffocating tension of the final months in close quarters with their failing leader. By April, Berlin itself had become a battlefield. Soviet forces encircled the city, shells shook the bunker with terrifying force, and the inevitability of defeat grew clearer by the hour. On April 20, Hitler ventured outside for the final time, appearing frail, stooped, and aged beyond recognition. In a surreal scene, he decorated members of the Hitler Youth, boys barely in their teens, with medals for bravery. The sight of a broken dictator clinging to gestures of defiance symbolized the collapse of a regime that once terrorized continents. Inside the bunker, however, the atmosphere grew even darker. Reports from the front revealed betrayal and disintegration. News that Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, had secretly sought negotiations with the Allies shattered Hitler's last illusions of loyalty. He denounced Himmler as a traitor and raged against perceived betrayal, sinking deeper into despair and fury. Within the bunker's narrow halls, the atmosphere became unbearable. Orders were still issued to phantom armies that no longer existed, generals argued over futile strategies, and dust fell as artillery rocked the ceilings above. By April 29, as Soviet soldiers fought only blocks away, Hitler made two final symbolic acts. He married Eva Braun in a brief midnight ceremony, granting his longtime companion the formal recognition of wife at the very edge of oblivion. Soon after, he dictated his political testament, a rambling document that sought to shift blame for Germany's destruction onto his generals and enemies, painting his downfall as betrayal rather than defeat. In his own mind, it was a final attempt to shape the legacy of his reign, even as his empire collapsed around him. The following day, April 30, 1945, the end came. After a final meal shared with Eva and his closest aides, Hitler retired with his new wife to his private study. Eva ingested cyanide. Hitler, moments later, placed a pistol to his temple and pulled the trigger. The gunshot reverberated through the bunker. Loyal aides rushed in, wrapped the bodies in blankets, and carried them up the narrow stairs into the blasted garden. Under constant bombardment, they doused the corpses with petrol and set them alight, carrying out Hitler's orders to prevent his remains from being captured and displayed by the Soviets. The fire consumed much, but not all, leaving charred fragments that would later become evidence and mystery alike. Elsewhere in the bunker, other grim decisions unfolded. Joseph Goebbels and his wife Magda poisoned their 6 children before killing themselves. Martin Bormann attempted an escape but perished in the chaos. Hitler's aides Heinz Ling and Otto Gunsch survived, only to be taken prisoner by the Soviets. Traudl Junge, the secretary, later recalled the surreal despair and exhaustion of those final hours. Rokas Misch, the radio operator, transmitted messages until the very last possible moment before fleeing into the ruins. Even Blondie, Hitler's beloved dog, was poisoned, victim of a final test of cyanide capsules. By May 1, the Soviets had reached the chancellery. By May 2, Berlin itself had surrendered. When Soviet troops entered the grounds, they discovered the remains of the chancellery and the bunker. Scattered, burned fragments were retrieved, including jawbones and teeth. Yet Stalin himself ordered secrecy. Rather than publicizing Hitler's death, he suggested to the Allies that the dictator might have escaped, to Spain, Argentina, or even the Arctic. This deliberate disinformation campaign fueled suspicion and ignited decades of speculation. In 1947, demolition teams attempted to destroy the Führerbunker, but its deepest chambers proved too resilient. Over time, it was buried, flooded, and hidden beneath construction. By the 1980s, the site lay beneath anonymous apartment blocks and parking lots. The very nerve center of Nazi Germany had vanished beneath the earth, erased from sight,